Today we're looking at the Messianic Dynamic, the truth that sets you free. It's very interesting to study this idea of the Messiah, and we think of one person when we think of the Messiah. But what's interesting about it is there have been many people show up that made the claim. There are people today that are making the claim that they're the Messiah. But 4 years before Jesus was born, there was a person by the name of Simon that was, he was a slave to King Herod for quite a while before he began to rebel. And he led a rebellion. And the followers that he had crowned him king or Messiah. And the Romans didn't like that, of course, and so they caught up with him and they slaughtered all of them. And then Jesus was born 4 years later, and then many years later, in about 132 A.D., another fellow showed up, Bar Kokhba. Simon, his name was Simon also. I don't know what the Simon thing is, but he led a revolt, lasted about 3 years, and the Romans caught up with him. So the point is, the Messiah is not a title you'd probably want in the Roman world because it was dangerous. And this is exactly why I think Jesus did not proclaim himself as the Messiah, that other people after him did. And I'm going to explain what I think the reasoning for doing this is. And I think it's driven by poverty. And that might sound strange, but it shouldn't here in a moment. So there's an excavation going on in where Nazareth used to be. And it's still there, but it's covered by, if you go on Google Earth and type in Nazareth, you'll see it looks like a typical city now. And what this ruin that we're looking at here is under a convent. It's apparent that the bulk of Jesus' audience were common people, probably peasants. Between the temple tax and the Roman taxes they were forced to pay, the financial burden was nearly impossible to bear. And this excavation, there's no way they could tell whether it would be Jesus' house, but they think, they think there were about 40 homes in Nazareth where most scholars think he was born, as opposed to Bethlehem. So they were just little peasant dwellings. Can you imagine living? He had 4 other brothers, and then we don't know how many sisters he had, but he had some. But can you imagine a family living in this cave-like place? It'd be hard to imagine. But the average person was poor, extremely poor. And one of the reasons they were poor is because of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, as well as the Romans. In contrast, the Sadducees and many Pharisees led lives of luxury. For the average person, the greatest appeal of the Messianic hope was economic freedom. So all these people were poor, and they were looking for relief from that. And the Messiah, probably more than for religious purposes, they were trying to get away from the poverty. And the Messiah would do this. He would overthrow everything. But this dwelling that you see here, it's one place. It's about 6,500 square feet. It's belonged to one of the Sadducees. They were making pretty good money. And they were making their money on the temple tax. That is, they were taxing the poor so they could live their life of luxury. And then the Romans were taxing on top of that. So it was a very difficult situation, and people would be very interested when they started hearing someone say, I wonder if this guy is the Messiah. That means my suffering could be coming to a close. And I think if you look at all the people that claim to be messiahs and look at the culture they were living in, most of them were suffering under poverty. And so that's a pretty important idea to latch on to. We think of it in terms of religion. But what most scholars say is the Sadducees, first of all, did not believe in resurrection. They thought when the soul died, or the body died, that the soul died. So they would not have believed Jesus was the Messiah, that Jesus was resurrected. So that's something important to keep in mind. We all do that. When we're in a position where we're suffering, whether it's financial, whether it's health, or whatever it is, we start looking for some kind of a Messiah, someone to help get us out of the situation, someone or something. But the Sadducees were not looking for a Messiah. This was not even something they were interested in talking about, because if a Messiah showed up, it would ruin their lifestyle, totally upset the whole scheme they had going on. And you know, the Sadducees were part of the reason Jesus was crucified. They turned him over to the Romans, to Pilate, because they did not want anyone talking about. First of all, they didn't want to upset the relationship that the Jews were having with the Romans. So anytime that there was mention of a Messiah or anything like that, they would downplay that and not want it to happen. The Pharisees, there were some that were supportive of that and others that were not. The Pharisees are kind of a different breed altogether, but they say the Sadducees looked at the average person as spittle. They just looked at them as non-existent. And it's really sad when you get into looking at the attitudes these people had. They were the ruling class. They were in charge of the law, in charge of the Sanhedrin, the court. And they're the ones that brought Jesus, before Pilate again. But there were some Pharisees that were for this idea of a Messiah coming. Some appear to have to believe Jesus was the Messiah. Paul was a Pharisee. And there was also the one that did made the tomb available. I can't think of his name at the moment. Joseph of Arimathea. He was a Pharisee. And there's times where Jesus had dinner, ate with the Pharisees. So they were not all like we think bad guys. There were a lot of them that were supportive. And I'm sure they were interested in whatever Jesus was talking about, however he presented himself, his message and so on, that it caught their attention. But there were a lot of them that were of that upper class that did not want a Messiah to come. And that's not something we are normally told, because we just assume all of the Jewish community was looking for the Messiah. The Pharisees that were saying they were looking for the Messiah were not really looking for the Messiah. They really didn't want him to come. But the ones that were truly genuine, I think you take any class of people, any occupation, and you'll have those that are really good at it. They're in it for the right reasons, and you'll have others that are in it for the position and for the whatever they can get out of it. It's self-service. But when the Messiah would come, he would clean house. So that was kind of a threat. When the Messiah comes, he will eliminate the Roman problem and cleanse the corruption from Jewish leadership. So if you were one of them, you would not want the Messiah to come. So just say the average person starts saying about Jesus, maybe he's the one. All the antenna would go up, and they would start listening, and they would, on religious grounds, often the Pharisees would approach Jesus and try to trick him with religious questions. But it wasn't because they were interested in his answers to their religious questions. It was more like they were interested in protecting their lifestyle. So they were trying to trick him so they could convict him of a crime, and they never actually did. And it, at least according to the gospel stories, and that's another thing we don't really know. The Gospels were written many years after the death of Jesus, and everything was kind of retold and reinterpreted and kind of put in a nice, neat package, where that's how we would think of it today. And actually, the Gospels were never intended to be put in the hands of people like us in the first place. People did not have the awareness that there was even another part of the world. I mean, they had that awareness, but at that moment, it was not thought of as a worldwide religion. It was thought of Jesus will return and it'll all happen here. They weren't thinking worldwide in terms of as we think of worldwide today. So despite what the Gospels tell us, I believe Jesus intentionally distanced himself from the title of Messiah. There were times when he told people not to tell anyone who he was, and scholars refer to this as the Messianic Secret. And this, when you think about this, and we've all remember reading passages of where there will be a healing and Jesus will tell the person, don't tell them that who you think I am, that I'm the Messiah. It's called the Messianic Secret. It's a theory that some scholars came up with in about 1901, I think. And some scholars reject it all completely today, but others still hold on to this idea that he was being mysterious about his messiahship. And I just personally thinking about that, why would he do that? Why would he be mysterious about it? And I think the answer is he was not mysterious about it. He didn't want it. He didn't want to have anything to do with it because he came with another message. He was not coming to fulfill the role of the expected Messiah. He would have been very comfortable in knowing what that should be. And I think he made every effort to not be that because it would, he wanted to distance himself from what he was actually teaching so it would not interfere. But apparently it did interfere. And when he was crucified, it shows the people turn on him because he did not fulfill the expectations of the Messiah. And I think he would have been saying in his own mind that I never promised that. That's not what I'm here to do. In fact, what he told us what he was here to do. He told Pilate what he was here to do. Associating himself with messianic expectations would detract from the spiritual aspect of his message. He spoke of an inner kingdom, but his audience was looking for economic, political, and religious changes. Pilate believed Jesus when he explained that the kingdom he represented was spiritual, not of this world. Had Pilate not been convinced, he would have executed Jesus for treason. There would have been no question. If Jesus said, yes, I'm the king and my kingdom is of this world, what Pilate would have heard him saying is, you mean the Roman world is not your reality? It's not the one you support? And he would have said, no more questions. You're gone. You're out of here. But he didn't do that. The response Jesus gave to him when he said, are you a king, or you consider yourself king? He said, well, you say I am, or others say I am, but I'm not saying that. He says, my kingdom is not of this world. The kingdom I represent is not of this world. He was being very clear to Pilate. And you can imagine he knows the situation he's in. It's very dangerous, that he knows how lethal that is. And so he's answering honestly. I never said I was going to usher in a kingdom in this world. That's not the kind of kingdom I'm talking about. The kingdom I'm talking about does not come through observation. You can't say, lo, here it is, or lo, there, because it's within. And that's, to me, his answer here is one of the points of evidence that Jesus was talking about a spiritual kingdom. He was not considering himself in any way as that expected Messiah. Again, he would have been very familiar with what that figure would look like and what that figure would do. Whenever somebody held themselves up, and what's interesting about these people that were declared messiahs is they declared themselves. They would tell the people, "I'm that person. I'm the one you're waiting for," and they would gather a following and create an army of some sort. But historians say that the army of the first Simon, who declared himself a Messiah or a king, that his army was not well organized at all. The Romans had no trouble eliminating them. They had trouble eliminating the one that came in 132 AD. It took them 3 years to take him out. But and that's when Masada happened, and all that period of time when Jerusalem was burned. It was totally sacked, and the temple was burned to the ground. That went on for quite a while. So that was a little better organized, but Jesus would have understood all of that, and the people around him would have understood what was involved and what was to be expected. So these guys that came in and were thought of as messiahs, they were warriors. They were going to take the Romans out. They were going to cleanse the elite Jews from the temple, bring everything back as God intended. You also remember the Essenes. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Essenes thought the temple was totally corrupt, is why they moved out into the desert, out by the Dead Sea. But their plan was to have a war against the Romans and also the Jews, their own people, because they were corrupt. They saw them as corrupt. They saw themselves as the sons of light, and all of the other people were the sons of darkness. There would be a great war. And so when the Romans were surrounding Jerusalem, and I think just a little before this, the Essenes actually went out. They hid all their scrolls in these caves. They sealed the fronts of the caves. And they never returned home because they encountered the Romans, and the Romans completely annihilated them. They were not ready to take them on. So there was a lot of activity going on where if you would know what you're getting into if you say, "I think I'm the Messiah." That'd be a big job and a dangerous job. And the moment it's said or said about you, the Romans' antenna go up and they come after you. They want to know. And that's why Pilate, I think, he said, "I find no crime in this man. So I don't believe he's the one that you're saying that he thinks he is. I believe him. I believe what he's saying." And he's saying that his kingdom is not of this world. There's nothing for the Romans to be concerned about. The Romans had absolutely nothing to fear about any Jewish uprising. They could handle it pretty well. But I think that's a point of evidence where Pilate did not have Jesus executed for claiming he was a king or claiming he was a Messiah. He put a placard on the cross that said "King of the Jews," and I think that was more the followers. He was putting that in their face. Here's your king, here's what happens when you try to come against Rome. It wasn't a mockery against Jesus. It was a mockery against the Sadducees and the ones that brought him before Pilate. But Jesus said he came to bear witness to the truth that would set people free. And actually you could see how that could be interpreted, because what would they be set free from? They would hear that as, "You're going to set me free from poverty. You're going to set me free from this suffering." But nothing happened. He came and went, and everybody's life remained the same. This is why the whole notion of a second coming took hold. So he comes and he goes. People say, "We thought he was the Messiah. We're very disappointed. It's very dark days for us because they took our leader away. Nothing's happened. I'm still going through what the daily survival that I'm going through, and it just doesn't look like anything's going to happen at all. So this rumor begins to circulate, well, he's going to come back. He was resurrected, and he's going to come back. And when he does come back, that's when it's going to happen. But look at that scenario over 2,000 years ago. If I was a person living in that day, and it didn't happen in my lifetime, and actually people were asking Paul, if he's coming back in our lifetime, where is he? And what about the people that have already died? Will they be saved? And so we have this idea that they'll be resurrected. We'll all meet Jesus in the sky, and the new day will begin. Well, Paul was beheaded shortly after that, so his life didn't turn out so well. Peter was beheaded, or Peter was executed. I'm not sure how. No, Peter, they say, was crucified upside down. Horrible. But all of the main church leaders were executed in just a very short period of time. So the Romans didn't mess around with this whole idea that something's going to come and change the world. That didn't really happen until Constantine became emperor in 300 some AD. It did. Finally, the Christians became a state religion. But that's a long time. So their hopes were not fulfilled, and it didn't happen like they thought either. There wasn't somebody that came back and started this whole new era. It was a Roman general turned emperor that changed the whole thing around, not a Jew. So it's kind of interesting when you put all that in perspective. But the point is, the Messianic expectation is it's a mental mindset. And there are people today that are looking at the world. They're seeing there's a lot of stuff going on. They're getting together in Bible studies and so forth. I've talked to several people that do this. And they're trying to figure out what's going on by reading the Bible, trying to figure out the prophecies and all of the things that are there. And it's the wrong place to look. Because you can take the Bible through any era, as this demonstrates, and you can put things together where it looks like it applies to the now moment. The only time Bible prophecy applies is when it was written. Like the book of Revelation, for example. It was intended to apply to the time that it was written, not to us. And yet people are taking it clear out of context and trying to read into it different things, signs that are happening and so forth. But what do we do with this line from Jesus? And we have to keep coming back to this because there aren't too many lines that he left us with. That it doesn't come through observation. Okay, it doesn't come through observation. So I'm going to look in the Bible and try to figure out the signs that I can observe. Why are we doing that? Why do we keep doing that? It doesn't make any sense. We're just putting aside one of the most important statements he made that's attributed to him, one of the clearest. It's not coming through observation, it's within you. And people don't get that because it seems very impractical. And it would have seemed impractical to the people of Jesus' day. One of the reasons that the feeding of the 5,000, stories like that, the feeding of the 4,000 and the 5,000 was so appealing to people is because they were poor. They weren't eating well. And so when he comes back, this guy, he can multiply loaves and fishes. He's going to save us from having to worry about what we're going to eat. So there are all kinds of things connected with poverty that made people want the Messiah to come, to set them free. You'll know the truth will make you free. What the gospel writers are trying to get us to believe the truth is the story they're telling. This guy, Jesus, is the Messiah. He's going to come back. You'll know this truth, and this truth will make you free. But Jesus, that would be one of the last things on his mind when he said it, I'm sure. He was saying there's a spiritual dimension that if you tap into it and you live your life from that place, there is freedom involved, because you're not always reacting and responding to negative appearances. You're looking at them through different eyes, and you're experiencing life in different ways. It seems extremely impractical to one who's suffering from poverty and from oppression. How's that going to solve my problem? Well, I think it did solve his problem, because he had the courage to go out and say, there's another way to live your life. There's another way to think, a place to think from that will give you greater freedom than you open your eyes first thing in the morning and start rehearsing your poverty day, going through all this scenario in your own mind first. That things must change within yourself first before they'll change outside. Well, people are saying, I wonder if the Messiah is coming today. He's saying you are that. You're the Messiah. It's the way you're using your mind. You can change that, and it'll make your life better. So what Jesus did not do in the past, he will return and do in the future. It's all of God's plan. The real appeal of the Messianic hope is its promise of a new age of eternal life and economic freedom. So if you say your life right now, it's your life, you're here now, you're in this, how are you doing it? How are you living it? How are you approaching it? Is your day a struggle? Are you free? If you're not free, what are you going through? How are you reacting to the daily events of life? How can you learn to rise above it? How can you get to the point where you see that your kingdom is not of this world, but of this world? This is the one you must get a handle on. And when you do that, take time to be still and let go of the appearance of things, you begin to get a sense of inner direction, inner power. That doesn't mean that it comes overnight. But if you're in something now and you're going through it, and I've said it 100 times through this whole transition we're making now, my mind will get out there in the future someplace that I can do nothing about, and I have to keep coming back, keep pulling myself back. And when I do, I find my Messiah. I find the freedom that I'm looking for in myself. And it's an interesting thing, because I'm thinking, well, I don't have to solve all those problems in the future. I'm here now, and I'm okay. Jesus did indeed accomplish what he came to do. I think that's the very important thing to focus on. The first coming is sufficient. He did indeed accomplish what he came to do. He bore witness to a truth that people simply did not understand. They were looking for one thing while he was trying to show them another. The movement that followed his death totally missed the mark and continues to this day to do the same. And I've got a picture of people looking up to the sky. Explaining how spiritual enlightenment can help one rise into a freer earthly experience is not an easy thing to do. Yet, for those who have the ears to hear and the eyes to see, this is exactly what Jesus did. He tried to teach people how to invoke their own Messianic dynamic. So we're in exactly the same situation that his audience was in. It's exactly in the same sense that we have an outer world, we have things going on we would like to change, and we have an inner world that we actually can do something about. When you realize spirit is your center of power, you pull your energy back into yourself, into this now moment. You live in the moment as much as you possibly can. When you find yourself running out there trying to solve the future, you pull it back. Take one step at a time. and things have a way. You know, you made it this far, I've made it this far, we've all made it this far, and we'll continue to go. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in independent unity, and have a wonderful week.